Welcome to episode 14 of the Discovery Files. Today we're interviewing Ken Coleman. So, Ken was with Victoria Resources when they discovered the Helen Zone. And I'll turn it over to you, Ken.
All right. Hey, thank you, Scott. Yeah, some of you listening may know me, but I've been working in Nevada now since about 2004, so going on 22 years. Worked for a variety of companies, juniors to majors, and we're talking greenfields exploration to near mine and production geology. So my career so far has covered the gamut. But what we're talking about today, the with Cove-McCoy and the company Victoria Resources, that was my first job in Nevada was with them, geological job. So it'll be good to go back through that.
Yeah, it's a lot of I don't know, I kind of find it like enjoyable kind of reminiscing about things that I forget during the process. And then as like, I'm interviewing people, it's like they'll remember things. And so
Yep.
so how did you get the job with Victoria?
Okay, so that's kind of a funny deal. So I bought a rock from the guy who's the senior geo there at that time, Marcus, if you remember him. And we were talking back and forth. I had gotten out of school. I withdrew from university at University of Idaho in Moscow and went to Ohio and just bought this rock randomly and started talking. And I was looking for ore specimens from the Carlin Trend because he was working for Newmont and had access to things of that nature. And just stayed in contact with him. And then when we moved to Elko in 2004, just left Newmont, went to work for Victoria, and I went over and met him in person, and we just stayed in contact. And when Victoria made a significant, I wouldn't call it a discovery, but they had a significant intercept on another project in 2004. They were able to raise some money on it. They needed people. Marcus was impressed by what I had already known at that time. So contacted the boss, our boss, you remember him, to give me a chance, and he did.
I think I've always been amazed by the role networking plays in geology and everything because I think probably 80% of my jobs have been from meeting people and just kind of staying in contact, like you said. And it's like, and then all of a sudden out of the blue, you'll get a call.
Yeah, that's been pretty much every job that I've had, I would say with the exception of my current position with NGM.
So when you came on, they drilled this initial intercept on another project. Was there a lot of excitement at the time around that? Like, I mean, it's 2004, right? So it's like
2004.
gold wasn't yet doing well. I think it was like 350, something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty low. Well, relative to now, it was pretty low, but, yeah, they were pretty excited. They were able to raise $4 million on it. It was an intercept, in the Cortez district. Mill Canyon is I remember it, 85 feet of .303 ounce per ton. That was the intercept. Not bad, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like, that's over 10 grams, right?
So, yeah,
That's not bad at
it
all.
it was exciting, and, for me, getting to be jump right into that where, they're onto something and drills are turning and stuff like that, it was as a beginning of my career, it was a good place to jump in.
Yeah. I think I remember reading someone's analysis at one point saying that, it was something like 90% of projects with a greater than 300 gram meter intercept went into production. So that's I mean, it was you said it was 80 feet at 10 grams, so that'd be like, yeah, that'd be almost 300, like
Yeah.
250, so that's pretty cool. That's a heck of an intercept.
Yeah, and that kind of went nowhere. So the people, the VPX and all the people who were above, us, um, had us do other things and do big step outs, and we never really followed up on it. So, but didn't really come up with anything significant. But that leads up to 2006, when Victoria was able to acquire the Cove project um, from Newmont.
Yeah, so we had Jeff, Nichols on the show talking about, like, kinda the his experience, like, in 2004, 5. So when you first came on the project, what was it like? Like, was there excitement around it? Did you guys kind of, had you done, like, an evaluation of all the historical data, or did you just kinda get this dump of all the information? Like, what was that like?
I didn't get to see much of the actual historic data, but I know they did do a initial review, and they were pretty excited about the prospect of picking it up, specifically because Marcus had done his PhD on the project, so he was aware of some things there. And there were existing intercepts all over that project, there still are, that have not been followed up on. So it was exciting. It was a good project to pick up. There was a lot of talk about it, and when we did, the initial focus actually wasn't to go work on where the Helen Zone was discovered not too long after. They put me on that project when we picked it up, and my initial work was to go map to the west at a prospect called Windy Point. So there's some high grade manganiferous jasperoids and altered dikes over there that were trenched and drilled. And the idea was to get over there and map it and trying to figure out why that little high grade pod's at surface and what might be at depth.
Yeah, that's always like one of those like just difficult questions, right? It's like, okay, what is going on here? And I remember going out there with you when I first started on the project, and there was like some green minerals, and I was about to lick it, and you're like, no, 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 don't lick those green minerals. That's arsenic.
Yeah. Yeah, some of that jasperoid there is very green, and yeah, you're talking greater than 1% arsenic in that. So
Yeah,
that's
that's so thanks for that. Appreciate it.
don't lick the green rocks and don't lick the Cheeto rocks. If you keep that in mind, then you're pretty good.
So, what was this like? Because you'd pretty much finished a geology degree, right? And because like when I met you, you were already like a well-rounded geologist. You were knowledgeable and everything like that. So it was like right out of the bat, was this like a daunting challenge? Because I know my first geology job, I was more than daunted by it.
Well, yeah, it actually was. And, I'd spent a little bit of time with some of the other senior geos in Mill Canyon picking up on how to map. So I had basic mapping and stuff like that in my pocket. I did a way before university, a whole lot of self learning. So let's put that out there. So I already had a pretty good background. But when you do that, you pick and choose what you like, right? So, but getting out there to actually be responsible for progressing the project forward after we just picked it up, yeah, daunting is a good word. Very hard to fight my own brain, thinking that why are they letting me do this, right? So that was always in the back of my head, and I don't know, it kind of drove me to just keep doing and doing, and sometimes it drove me bonkers, and sometimes it drove you guys bonkers.
It's
It's kind of
it's
where
a
it came
tough thing,
from.
right? Because like, I've heard people call it, like, imposter syndrome and things like that, and I know people feel that for decades sometimes into their careers, especially if they change to a new project and you kinda start over, and, like, what I've seen is there's 2 ways to go through it. Is one is people give in and they leave, or 2 is they go, "Well, I'm gonna figure this out." So clearly you chose the "I'm gonna figure it out" route. So, yeah, so, like, by the time I worked with you, you're already, like, an accomplished mapper and everything, so I would definitely say you were figuring it out. I guess what kinda led you towards, the Helen Zone eventually?
So, as I stated when we picked up the project, the initial focus was Windy Point, and I was just able to handle the technical stuff on the ground, but our boss at that time wanted to handle all the permitting and stuff of that nature. And that didn't happen. He didn't get a notice of intent put in place in time for us to make promises that were made to people above us that we're going to drill this project. And the Helen Zone, there northwest of Cove, what became the Helen Zone, still had a permit in place from the Newmont drilling that was done right before we picked up the project. And so the idea was we're going to just go over there and switch and drill over there, and started looking at the data. And there's some ASX holes, or I think were the Newmont holes. And a couple of them had some pretty nice high grade intercepts down. I think it was right at the home station Panther Canyon unit contacts. Pretty good grade material. And so we're looking at the strat and looking at stuff, and that's pretty much it. Decided we're going to drill deeper holes right there, follow up and see what this high grade is about. And that's what we did and hit on the first hole. I don't remember. This is a terrible thing. Is I don't remember what that intercept was. It was hole NW1. It was like 125 feet of 0.45 or something like that. I don't.
Yeah, that's definitely respectable. I remember, like, because I think by the time I started, they'd started drilling NW5 before I was there, and I think they ran out of money, and then they hired me when they got more money, and then, like, we resumed drilling that. But I remember, like, kind of going through some of the data and talking to Raul and talking to Marcus and yourself and some of the other geos on the project. We had a ton of good geos. And I just remember being, like, blown away with, because, like, like Raul's describing, like, mapping I think it was these northwesters and these northeast structures, and you guys were mapping them, not just him. But and then essentially going, okay, well, let's put NW1 into this structure, and I think it was NW2 went into the same structure, and then 3 and 4 went into the other structure. But do you wanna talk about that kind of process? Because I was just really impressed with how that methodology worked out in this case.
Yeah, it's really kind of simplistic, but it works, right? So you do the basic mapping, and then to verify what it's doing at depth, it's good to put limits on what you're working on. It was anyway, I think it was actually 3 holes. So, 3 holes on a plane, and 3 holes makes a plane, right? So But the idea was basically to put a fan into where you think your major controls are, be they fault structures or folds or anything of that nature, but to go across them at depth at different intervals and verify and basically put a 3D constraint so that you can put volumes on. This is something that
Mhm.
we do all the time, but at that time, I guess people weren't really focusing on. But that was really the point, is to verify at depth where these things are going, and then you can calculate volumes and assess the size of the target and what it might be, and also use that to generate other targets beyond where you're initially looking at. Like, you can go to an existing mine, and once you figure that out and verify it with a few drill holes, it doesn't take many. These things can be projected, right? And these are what people like the term feeder fault. These things are dynamic in 3D sense, and the fluids go the path of least resistance wherever it is. So assuming it's going to be on this planar feature is kind of silly. So doing this method of not just drilling a fan of holes and making a nice pretty cross section, but figuring out what it's doing in 3 dimensions. That's the purpose.
Yeah.
And it
And not
works.
just relying on the surface mapping because it's like, this is a guide, but then the structures might deflect or they so you just need to be sure where they're going.
Yeah, especially like if, for example, the northwest faults that are mapped in the Cove pit. Well, some of those are reverse faults, and we drilled them in hole 3. Beautiful reverse fault. And that's following the hinge line of the fold, the Cove anticline. And that's seen all over Nevada, right? So those are important things. They tend to be listric. They shallow with depth. And so if you're mapping up here where it's steeper at surface and you try to project that and go through it, and you're not actually in your favorable horizon where you want to go, that matters.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, like, I remember hearing about what the target was for NW5, and it's always, like, in hindsight, because I think it's been 18 years or something like that now. But I remember, like, hearing that the target concept was essentially, okay, we have these 2 structures. We've kind of nailed down the geometries from the first 4 holes, and so now it was like it was like a structural intersection of those 2 structures projected down to a favorable host rock. Is that right? I'm
That's
not sure if
correct.
I'm remembering that right. Okay.
Yep, that's
And so
exactly.
do you wanna describe NW5? Because I
Yeah,
figure that's better for you to do.
yeah, that was actually the best hole, that we drilled. So I think it's 205 feet of, whatever that comes out to meters, but the average grade of that hole was 25 grams for 205 feet. Yeah, so
I think it was the best intercept in Nevada that year, wasn't it?
I probably so. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't remember if that's exactly true or not, but
Yeah, let me
it was a
let me do the
doozy.
math. So that's 62 meters, and what was the grade again?
About 25 grams.
So 1,550 gram meters. That sounds right. That sounds like off the top of my head. So yeah, going back to that 90% of deposits with a greater than 300 gram meter hole, I would say that that qualifies.
That qualifies, yeah. But getting an NW5, so yeah, that was a follow-up after we actually drilled 5 holes, so NW2 and NW ended up being NW2A, so NW2 we lost. But that hole played into what we did with everything else, and those NW2 was actually a very important hole, because we hit on the first hole, NW1, so we drilled the second hole to the north of that hole to go across the northwest faults that are along the aniform hinge, or the anticline hinge there at Cove, and drilled all of the same alteration. We drilled through the home station or through the Panther Canyon into the home station and the Favret, and everything's decalcified and beautiful and sulfidized. And like, yeah, we're on it, right? And the assays came back, and that was a pretty dead hole. So, what's the going price of
No kidding.
alteration these days? Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a lesson I learned working in the Carlin trend was I remember at one point taking 2 drill holes from this one deposit and setting them out for like some high level guy from a company to look at. And one was extremely high grade and one was just I think it was like detection limit gold. And they looked identical.
yeah,
And it was so wild that you could have this wildly strong decalcification and all the other, like it even had like the little I heard it called like ghost elite, like the little white kind of clay veinlets. And it had all the ingredients and it was just dead. But it tells you that like fluid went through the system, right?
yeah, yeah, it did. And
So that was
so
probably discouraging, I imagine.
it was discouraging, but it was the first of 3 holes we were gonna drill, right? So, that hole was to the northeast. NW1 was kind of a almost east-west directed hole to go across the northeast faults, and then NW3 was steeper, and it went between the 2, and that's the one that went across the reverse fault. There's a name to it that was mapped, but, anyway, it went across that. And that proved to be important because that gave us our constraint because the alteration was on both sides of that fault, but the gold stayed to the south of that northwest fault. So that ended up defining that intersection between the northeast and the northwest faults right there. Then we started focusing on that and everything went into that. And then it's just hit after hit after hit.
Yeah, I think it was 10 hits in a row. It all came out with great, like, ore grade intersections.
Yep.
Like, I'd never seen anything like that at that point in my career. Like, I drilled, another program, and it was like we'd have really good intercepts, and then we'd have bad intercepts, and then we'd have and I'd never seen anything where it was like, "Okay, they're all coming back."
Yeah, it is, and they were kind of so the idea was, well, maybe this thing would have a steeply plunging geometry, the mineralization itself, and it kind of does now that it's has a lot of drill holes in it when you're right into the throat of where that intersection is. But like most Carlin types, when you get out of the conduit, a lot of the mineralization spreads out laterally in the stratigraphy in favorable horizons or stuff that's been prepped, right? So as we're drilling these holes, that's what I started seeing is this stuff is appearing at the same elevation generally over and over, depending on where we're drilling the holes. And that's where we started seeing some of that style of mineralization. So we wouldn't have all these breccias and stuff like that. It's just decalcified limestone and spread out away from where there is. But the component when we were in it, so NW5, going back to that hole, are the dikes and sills. So we called them all dikes at that time. They've been proven to be some of them are sills, they're not all dikes, but of different flavors, right? Different characteristics. And the bottom of the intercept in NW5 was in one of these dikes and it was very well mineralized. So just clay city sulfide.
I remember logging, and it was the first time I'd ever logged Carlin style rocks, and I still actually just had a very clear visual of that dike with the city sulfide in it. It was like, "What's all this kind of, like, dark black stuff in the dike?" Because it was kind of a light gray dike, right, with, like,
Yeah.
little quartz phenos and all that, and then it was just like this, yeah, and it was I just remember being like, "Is this, like, carbon or something? What is this black stuff?" It was like drill mud.
Sulfide.
Yeah, yeah, and I still have a distinct memory of walking into the core shed after they hit that initial intercept and put it in and we stacked it on the shed. We'd washed it at night, and then we came back the following morning. I still have a distinct memory of the way that smelled.
Oh, yeah.
It was it was like, and I, subsequently, like, working in other parts of the Carlin Trend is like, "This smells like money," right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, because
It's
it's
no joke. You can smell it.
yeah, yeah, it's like this, and it would grow melanterite overnight, and it was like just wild amount of sulfide.
Yeah, it and I have that similar experience right now, with the project I'm working on with NGM is yeah, the city sulfide is very unstable, and you know it, and you know you're gonna have grade when you find it, so
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting. It's like, so what did you feel at this time? I mean, like, because first job, and it's like, and you're like right into the became the big discovery project, right? And it's like, and then of course, I'm sure all the pressure's on, but what were your feelings at the time? Was it excitement or trepidation or?
excitement and, the same thing as I stated when they put me on the project was, "Am I good enough for this?" Literally, that was, a big deal, and it was a big deal, like, this was at the top of the news around the country and in Canada, and, um, it was a big deal, and I don't know.
It's a
It
lot
was
of
a lot.
pressure.
There's a lot of pressure, yeah, and I was supposed to lead that and help all these other geos and all that. I just have to say, sometimes I handled it well, and sometimes I didn't, and now 22 years into my career, I use it as a something to tell younger geos, when you first start doing something, it's gonna suck. It's gonna suck really bad, and you just gotta keep doing it, and once you do, then it gets better and it goes away, but it'll always be that way. Every new thing that you're gonna do in this industry, or anyone for that matter, is gonna be that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And and then throw in, the just that general feeling that, why am I doing this? Why are they letting me do this? It's hard to fight that battle in my own brain,
It's
but
it's a
super
it's a big
exciting at the
deal, right?
time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's exciting, but I've been there before as well, where it's just like, you just don't feel worthy of the project. You don't feel like you know enough to do it justice. And of course there's aspects of truth to that, right? Like in hindsight, I like, like one of the projects I was like, boy, I wish I'd known what this, looked like, because I could have actually, mapped that. And at the time I'd never encountered it. So I didn't see it until a consultant came out. And it's just like, and then I was like, you can lament about all the things. It's like, years of opportunity lost. And And it's like, and I just kind of like had learned from that experience and other experiences that it's like you're going to make mistakes. You just push forward as best you can, and it's giving me a little bit more grace towards other people as well, because it's like it's made me go, they're probably feeling that too. It's probably not just me, and because at the beginning I thought it was just me feeling that way, and that's and then you're like feeling like the one person that doesn't fit into the group, and you're like, and
Yeah.
it's a bad feeling, right? It's a really bad feeling.
It's not a comfortable thing at all.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that's probably like pushed for a lot of personal growth and professional growth as well during that process. Do you want to like, has anything stood out in your mind about like what you learned from that?
That's a pretty good question. I would say the biggest thing, and I've carried it forward with every place I've worked since, was how key the foundation work is before you even get to the stage of putting a hole in it. Like actually doing really good mapping and taking the time to do that. So if you remember, our mapping campaigns lasted like 6 or 8 months. So
Yeah,
uh, I've been with other companies where like that's
yeah,
I'm sorry, that's not enough to get and it's foundational. It's like don't skimp on the foundational stuff.
yeah. And I remember like you guys did it was like a modified anaconda style of mapping, right? And you had like like the base sheet and transparencies. I remember Raul, like saying at one point like, I don't want any of that PCS, and it was like, what's that? And it's like PC shit. I don't want you to do this on the computer. I want you to do it on paper. And at the time, I was like, super like techie, and I was like, no, I want to do it on the computer. And it was like, and there's a lot of lessons learned in that, like of how valuable it is getting your ideas down on paper, and mapping on paper was. I still kind of go back to I haven't seen a digital solution that works as well as doing that kind of anaconda style of mapping. So it's, uh, what was your do you have any like favorite memories from when you were mapping on the project?
I would say the probably most intense experience I had, I was mapping north of Windy Point up in the so there's a big flat tabletop of volcanics that follows one of these major northeast faults that go through there. But I was up there with Juan, if you remember Juan.
Yeah.
We were up there mapping. There's a series of erosional exposures of the stratigraphy below the volcanics along both sides of that range, and we were out there. And this was in spring, so spring in Nevada is notorious, and everything's great. We left all our jackets and stuff on the four wheelers back where we parked them, and we're clear the heck up here, probably halfway between the end of the range and Cove-McCoy proper. And a storm came in, and it came in really fast, and it went from wind to rain to hail, and we had to walk back in that. Talk about miserable. So that was so I know it's not geological, it's in my head as like this is serious stuff when you're out mapping to have an experience like that.
Yeah, I mean, like people die every year from things like that, right? And it's like, and it's one of the things that I actually learned from working with Victoria, because we had a similar experience another time I was mapping, and was always pack a light jacket in my bag. And so I like ever since then have carried a light jacket on every project I've ever been at. And people are like, it's the middle of summer, right? And I was just like, yeah, no, I know, but I don't want to die also. One of the things I was gonna ask you about is, I remember when you were showing me some of the mapping in the area, and we were out, and you were describing this, and I think it was the first time I'd heard the fractal nature of geology, right? And you were showing me, because we were looking for these like northwest structures, and you were like describing that, oh, here's these structures that are kind of wider spaced, and you see they're starting to get closer together. So that means we're getting closer to the structure itself. And then you found an outcrop that had like this like perfect microcosm of what the target was. Do you want to kind of talk through that? Because I think it was a really cool description to see. And I just thought like it'd be good to hear.
Yeah, and I think I remember where that was at. So that was between the Cove Pit and the Windy Point prospect. So, but yeah, so this mapping style, figuring out so you can figure out geometries and volumes and all that. Well, I think this is taught. I'm not certain if it has or not, but basically when a fault propagates, it also has fractures, right? So if you've looked at things, they tend to be really tight. That's how you get a fault. That's where everything's broke, right? And then you're getting a whole series of really tight fractures, and they'll start to decrease away from that what you would call a main break outward. And usually where those faults are or where the fracture density is really high is not exposed. It's because it's going to weather easily, right? So it's usually covered. So um So that's something that was part of our methodology, was to go to these areas and just start mapping the density of fractures and the spacing. And you start doing that and you start picking up on patterns across multiple transects in the area of where you see the same orientation, and you start seeing a direction of where this is increasing. And then if you look off, well, lo and behold, there's a recessive zone over here. That's probably where it's at, right? So then the concept of intersecting structures. So you do that with both, and just think about it for the physics of it, right? If you have two intersecting faults or two intersecting fracture systems, faults are actually not very good for fluids to be carried. They tend to be aquitars, fluids sit against them, but fracture systems, either in the hanging wall or footwall, stay open, right? So those are going to be, especially at an intersection, those are going to be your fluid's path of least resistance, and that's where they're going to go. And so that's basically what we were looking at in the small scale in that outcrop, was where those two come together. It's a term that we use called semi-jasperoid, which it basically is just some weak silicification. It's not wholesale replacement of the limestone, a true jasperoid. Just that's where the fluid's focused, and you can see that. And so you also have to think about the concept of time and when these things were forming. So all of these fracture systems were likely forming at the same time on a crustal scale in the region, right? Because the tectonics at the time, all these things were forming. So let's say go into the Eocene, it was the onset of extension. These things were all happening at the same time at the scale. What you see, the fractures, what you see is the consequence of that tectonics. And so you should see the patterns. It should be the same. They all happen at the same time. And because of that increasing density as you get towards your main breaks, then you're going to see that. That's the fractal. So it gets smaller and smaller, but the same thing was happening in those rocks at the same time. And so it will repeat at those scales. So you can apply what you see in an outcrop to a deposit. You can apply what you see in a deposit to a district, and you can apply what you see to the district to an entire region. So you go to Cortez, you go to Getchell Turquoise Ridge, you go to Carlin, you go to Jarrett Canyon. These structural fabrics and the orientations are almost identical in all cases. And they should be. They happened at the
Yeah,
same
they're
time.
regional yeah, the regional forces happening, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like and you know, you'll have, like, strain partitioning in places around intrusives and things like that,
That's
but
which is important.
that was one of the lessons I took from this project for the rest of my career is you should be able to find a rock on your project that looks like your geological model, and if you can't, it probably means your model's wrong. It was a really valuable lesson. So, like, I just always remember that one outcrop with that semi jasper and just being like, this is amazing."
Yeah. Yeah, and so I carry that to all the work and making 3D models, and that's, something that I'm wrestling with right now is I have to putting this model together, actually working on it, so in improving upon what I'm working with right now is it has to be put into the context of time for all of these components. So it's cool to have these neat geometries, but what I found is if you have to start invoking special tectonics or all this stuff, it's probably not correct. Go back to the basics, go look at the maps, and if there's not a lot of mapping, get out in the field and go look at it. So, and see
And I
what it's like.
And I think that's one of the really valuable things again that I took into to my career is like if you're not finding this, you need to go out in the field again and look for it. So it's like so if you're trying to interpret something and you're going, well, we're not quite sure what this is. It's like, all right, that now gives you a focus to look for in your mapping. So mapping is not just, I mean, there can be an aspect of wandering around in the field, but what I've found is most effective because we never have all the time in the world to do that is like what's most effective is you go, I need to answer this question, and here's where I need to go answer it at, and then you head out there to look for it, you know, and it's like, and if you can prove it wrong, great, and if you know prove it right in the process of trying to prove it wrong, also great.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But that's probably the biggest thing I took from my time with them, and a lot of that formulated at Cove. I spent most of my time at Cove.
Yeah.
Was carrying that ability to go out, do the basic legwork and do it well, take your time and document it on paper. So you brought that up, this thing of doing stuff on paper, it makes you wrestle with the data, right? And what you're looking at and actually make it sink in. It's like writing something. So you can be told something, you probably won't remember much of it. But if you write it down, that takes it takes whatever it is you're writing and makes it real. It puts it in your head and it stays there. So I think that's what the
Someone
ticket.
once told it to me in a way that really stuck, where they said, "When you write notes, whether it's like listening to someone talk or anything else, your brain is translating it into a written form. And in that process of translating it, it commits it to memory in a different way, and you analyze it in a different way. And so if you're typing notes on a computer, it can be similar, but they say the physical connection with penmanship is a far more effective like implanter of the idea in your brain. And I think that's also the beauty is you're going through and you're drawing a line, you're drawing a contact, and then you go, oh, you know what? I just missed this. It was offset by a fault. Let me just erase this. Let me go back and I'm gonna go look for the offset portion of this. And then you just kind of continue on. You're not trying to trick software into working, right? You're thinking through the process, and the map is that medium of thinking, right?
Yeah, and then, um, about the time when all that stuff, I think it was 2008, you were around during that time, we had a bunch of layoffs, right? And we were still working on Cove, and it was still going, but a lot of the geos you and I worked with, they all kinda disappeared, overnight, right? And that was a different experience, again, to have that happen, and then I remained aboard and a couple of the other geos, and that's something else, learning to go through that, and I've been through several layoffs now, so it's part of the industry, right? I've come to expect it.
Yeah. That's the unfortunate side is, right, is I'm the same. I think I don't remember if I saw the writing on the wall or if you just remember seeing the writing on the wall, but like my previous employer had run out of money. And so I kind of was like, oh, this kind of feels like that. And I remember like, I think I left like 2 weeks before the layoff.
Yeah, it wasn't
And
long.
yeah, yeah, and then but I just remember, like, and, like, everybody on that project was a good geo. Like, I can't say is that we were hiring, crap geos, and I've talked about that in another episode as we did a layoff at another place I was at, and we laid off good geologists, and it's like and so you always, hear it thrown around like, "Oh, yeah, it's cutting dead weight," and all that, and it's like and what I've seen over and over is maybe that happens, but oftentimes it's choosing between who is critical to a project in terms of what they know and what they've done so that they can continue on a project and who's not, right? And so like, I look at I definitely would have been laid off at the time because it's like I was just mapping, right? And I was just logging. I wasn't adding intrinsic value beyond, like trying to be observational and things like that. But it's so I think it's good that they kept you because like you're running the project, right? So it's like if you on your knowledge goes as well, and that's one of the major risks in a layoff is if they're not done well, or even sometimes you don't have a choice, right? Like there's been some where it's like a mass layoff and you just don't have a choice, and you're gonna lose brain trust.
Yeah, and that's the next part of my involvement with Cove was after that, because we had fewer people and we still had 9 projects, right? And so that allowed the opportunity. I didn't handle it very well. So going through that and the pressure, I did not handle it very well. And so Raul pulled me off the project and put me on another project.
Interesting. That must
But
have felt terrible, I imagine. It's just
it
like,
did, but in hindsight, it was a good decision. So
mhm,
I can see that. And I got to see other rocks, right? So I had spent so far my career at that point most of my time on that project. So to be able to go out and look at some of these other projects and other deposit styles was actually uh, a a win. It was a positive. It was a positive thing, but it got me out of the purpose. It got me out of the pressure because I wasn't handling it well. And then I was brought back toward the end of my tenure with that company, to finally drill where I started. So worked up the target at Windy Point, and we drilled it. Was excited, got all the nice alteration, everything we wanted to see, but it wasn't a very good hole.
meh.
I think the best interval in there was 5 feet of 7 grams. Otherwise, most of it was like that NW2 hole. It was a whole lot of alteration and nice looking rock, not a lot of gold. Uh,
Yeah, that's always one of the big challenges is like, are you walking away too soon or are you walking away just in time? And because I've seen so many projects where they have like these great intercepts, and then you put in like a porcupine holes around them, and there's nothing. And it's like, okay, so we happen to hit the one bit of gold that like coalesced in this fracture. Like, what is the story there?
Yeah, not likely to be an ore body. There's a lot of smoke over there, and that's the other thing, right? So this was an initial workup, and never got to actually look at the information after the fact, after that hole was drilled. So I didn't even get to see the results. So if you remember, that was kind of Raul's deal is nobody got to see assays unless they were
Oh,
shown
yeah,
to.
yeah. That did not feel very good to find out assays from press releases.
Yeah. Well, that's a unique experience if I can backtrack, if you don't mind, for
Yeah,
NW1. So, yeah, we had logged it and shipped it off and had all this nice alteration, and I don't remember where I was, but even though I was on the project, I didn't get the results, so but Raul called me, and it was on days off, and he's like, "I need you to come down to the office right now." And he was fairly stern about it, and I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Just get down here. I need you to come down here. I gotta talk to you."
you have that
Okay.
sinking feeling of going, "Oh, okay, I guess I'll be
Well,
there
my wife
soon."
was like, "I just got a call from my boss, and he sound concerned. I've gotta go tend to this and figure out what it is." So I go down to our office and walk in, and he and Marcus are in their office, and I was expecting something terrible just by
Yeah,
his
the demeanor.
tone, right? And I walk in, and these guys are in there just laughing and having a conversation, and I walk in, and I was like, "What's going on? What's up?" And Raul flips his computer, his laptop open. He's like, "Come look at this," and showed me that intercept, and I was like, really? This is actually happening?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, this just happened." So that part was pretty exciting to do that, to be
Yeah. And
see
also
it
it shows
in
it
the time.
it shows trust as well, right? Where it's like it was kind of an interesting thing. I remember, working I think we were in the old Plasterdome office, if I
Yeah,
remember right, in
yeah,
Reno.
on Rock
Um,
Boulevard, yep.
yeah. There's, like, when they're, like, showing me around the office, and when I started, they're like, "Oh, yeah, and then here's, like, there's beer in the fridge, help yourself, just don't get drunk, and then here's, vodka if you want, and then here's wine," and I was like, "What is this?" And it was like, "Well, you're not a child, so
Yeah,
we trust you to be an adult," and it was kind of an interesting thing where it was, and nobody took advantage of that, like, the whole time I was there, I never saw anybody do anything inappropriate. So it was an interesting experience to, be like, "Oh, okay, so," and he explained, I think, some of his reasoning for not sharing assays. It was like stuff like it's confidential, and if this leaks, it can have big impacts in the market with legal repercussions, and it was a little bit different time and stuff. There wasn't a lot of people drilling at the time, so it was like, the press releases got a lot of attention.
yeah,
But I just kind of remember like that weird, like almost like dichotomy of trust, where it's like, okay, so I can have like vodka in the office, but I can't know assays.
yeah,
Is, and it was but I think there was a lot to be said for the autonomy, like, granted, I think, like, whenever anybody that we were mapping with, we were kicking around on the field, you always had to give reports back to Raul every day, but I felt like we were always trusted to do things in the field, right? It was like that's what it felt like to me in hindsight. Maybe I'm remembering with the rose-tinted glasses of history, but
no, no, actually, you're not. So that's one of the things that I told about the early part of my career, and I value is the autonomy. We did get autonomy. It was expected. We had expectations of stuff to do, and then just let us do it. That was the deal. So we need you to go map this area, go get it done, and let me know when you're done. That was really it, and figure it out because that was the thing he was key on. He's like, if there's something you're wondering about over in the next mountain range, go look at it. If you're
yeah,
curious, go
yeah.
look at it. It's worth your time. It's learning, right? That's
And we
something.
always did.
Yeah,
I just remember always after work when we're driving back to wherever we're staying at, it was like we were always going in the field and kicking around, but it was always go investigate, go understand things, get context, right? And I just remember, it was a really unique place to work, right? It was, yeah, like, it was, I don't know, like, like, one of the things I wanna explore in this series of interviews is what is it that makes discovery happen, right? And then there's always going to be, like, some component of luck, but it's like, what I kind of feel is that a lot of it is setting the stage so you can take advantage of luck.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's true, right? Luck favors the prepared. um,
Yeah.
and yeah. So the for this case at the Helen Zone, I think the major components are one, the project is a good project, right? You got to have the right space. You can do all this great geology, but if you don't have good rocks in the right environment for what you're looking for, so what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Two, you have to have an environment that is conducive to the technical side of things, to where you have the right people in there and the right skills, and you develop that. So that's the good thing about Victoria, that all this stuff that we're talking about is very very keen on developing. Right. So let you go do it. If you want to learn about something, learn it. It's up to you. I'm not going to hold your hand. Go do it. and you're not gonna get in trouble for it, right? So, there's
Yeah,
that autonomy. Autonomy is important. The ability to go investigate and take the risk at figuring something, whatever it might be. If you look at some other things in my experience, when really cool things happens, that's one of the components is you are allowed to take the risk and allowed to be wrong.
yeah. And I think it's an interesting point. Like early in my career, when I first started managing people, I was trying to learn how to manage people better. And I remember learning, and it's stuck with me, and it's actually been an incredibly successful tool. But someone said you need three things to be a good manager. You need to grant people autonomy. They need to have the ability to fail, because if you can't fully fail, and you have to guide them away from giant failures, so it doesn't be like, become like a catastrophic thing, but they have to have room to fail. Otherwise, they can't have room to grow. They need to have purpose. So they need to know what they're doing actually matters to the company. And then they need to have mastery. They need to be able to learn. They need to be able to get better at what they're doing. And I remember like after I left Victoria, I went to another project which I'd worked at before. And I was only, I think, at Victoria for like 11 months or something like that. And I went to this other project, and it was like I saw it with fresh eyes, where it was like, oh, and there's this and this and this going on, and we can do this. And we changed like drill orientations, and we were off to the races.
Yep.
And I just remember being like, how much I learned 11 months. And if I hadn't been given that autonomy or any of these other things, I mean, I've worked at places for far longer than that, where you're still a little bit better, like marginally better, but not like dramatically better.
Right.
There's a lot of lessons from Victoria, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this series of episodes on Cove-McCoy's Helen Zone. Is I felt like Victoria didn't just have the Helen Zone, right? I mean, like it was a difficult time for money and financing and everything else, but they had multiple projects that looked really promising, and I think other companies have picked them up and had success on them based on some of the work that Victoria had done. So
Well, that's the other things. There's discovery, and then there's also value creations. And Victoria at that time, we were one of the most successful junior companies in Nevada, and there's no doubt in my mind. And after I had left the company, it only existed in the state for another 2 years. I think they were done in Nevada in 2012. But Victoria monetized. We had 9 projects. Victoria monetized in total all of those projects for just under $100 million. 96 million.
that's incredible,
That's
especially for
incredible,
the time, right?
right? So that's value that our team created by working on these projects, and we didn't just have the discovery at Cove. We were doing good things on all of these projects at various stages of advancement. So enough that companies picked them up and paid cash and stock and all that to the tune. And I figured this up. I'm trying to remember why I figured that number up. It might have been for a bio or something. I did one of these interviews with analysts for a company I worked with a couple years ago. So, and that was one of the things like, what can you point to as something meaningful? And I was like, well, that's the best way to put it into numbers is to, after this company ceased to exist, they sold all the assets for just under $100 million. And so
Yeah,
that's
that's
stuff that
very
you did.
telling.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the thing is like, a lot of companies just stop paying maintenance fees on their claims, and they reclaim the drill roads, and then that's it, right? So they've realized no money from that, so to realize $100 million out of that is pretty impressive, so so we've kinda talked a little bit about, some of the lessons you've learned, but are there any lessons you've learned that have stuck with you for the rest of your career that we haven't already discussed that come to mind?
That's a really good question. Nothing really strikes me.
Yeah, and I think
It's
you covered a lot of it already, so it's
again, it's just the big ones is foundational work is key and the ability and time to do that. And then just when you're new at something, it's just not going to be fun. That's just the way it is.
yeah. And I think, I don't know, there's a lot of things that I remember from Victoria, some of which I thought were ridiculous at the time, and some of which I thought were great at the time. But I got one of the other ones I took out of was maximizing your data that you generate off of a drill hole, right? I mean, I think we were logging 10 meters, like 30, it was like 34 feet a day. And if we logged more than that, you could get yelled at, right? Like I think I logged, like 50 feet one day, and Raul was like, what are you doing? It's like you couldn't possibly see it in the detail. And I remember being like, "Oh, this is a waste of time." But we were like describing things on like the like the Hanlon's level. Right? I kind of go back to there was so many things like, we were doing the early stage oriented core with like that ACT1, and it was kind of terrible and it would fail a lot. And so like, by the detail we're doing, it was like, oh no, okay, we had a failed Orion there, but we actually can tell what the orientation of this core is based on these fractures because we know these textures are always at this orientation within a few degrees, so we can orient it. And so I just remember looking back and going, wow, if you're going to drill 5 hole, or let's say the first 4 holes, 4.5, with that one like that stubbed off, but it's like, and then your fifth hole becomes the discovery hole, and then the next 10 all hit. And I think it was beyond that, but it was like, I just remember it was at least 10.
Yeah, we drilled 14 holes.
Yeah, so it's like you're really actually getting a lot out of that data. So it wasn't just a waste of time. It wasn't like we were just sitting there like automatons. It was genuinely collecting data that Raul and Marcus and yourself and other people were using. And that's pretty cool, Going back to that whole purpose thing, when you're logging in that much detail and you can actually see that it matters,
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it does matter, and it's something that I use now, like, for example, not even doing oriented core, but just ATV data, like, so, you get an orientation from that, but some of the fabrics, like healed fabrics and breccias and things like that, don't show up very well at all with ATV, but joints and cross-cutting gougy zones and stuff like that show up really well, and if you have good cross-cutting relationships established with that type of detailed logging, and that's the way I log, that exact thing. So, yeah, we got an orientation on this joint set. It's pervasive through this zone of mineralized breccia. Well, we know what that orientation is. We can take that and we can figure out the orientation to actually get a strike and dip off of the fabric that this joint's cutting through, right? Because the angle's not going to change. And do like we did at Victoria, take the core and actually orient it with the drill hole in space, put it in, it's called a goniometer, and take a strike and dip. You can put your Brunton on it.
I think I don't know, it's kinda interesting, like, just how many things I learned in that 11-month period that I used for the rest of my career, and because they worked, right? Like, that's the thing that it showed me is these are techniques that will actually result in discovery and have, that's, I think, the best part is it's not like, "Oh, I guess it was secret sauce that only he knew." It was like, "No, no, no, this has actually worked," not just for me, but for you and for a number of other people on that project, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
pretty
mean,
cool.
I think everybody who worked there have, they've carried that, with them, if they're still, I'm not certain everybody's still active in the industry, but, they've certainly carried that. It's foundational work. It's good observational work, and, it matters. And the reason why it works is goes back to the time thing. It works because these things happened at the same time, and if you put that 4th dimension into everything you do, that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's like a key, and again, another a key thing, like another learning is like, you need to understand what structures, fabrics, unit contacts existed before gold. You need to understand what was happening during gold, and you need to understand what's changed after gold, right? And if you're not paying attention to cross-cutting relationships, some of which we literally were looking at on the Hanlon scale, millimeter offsets that told you, oh, this orientation's a little bit younger, just a little. And if you see that consistently, it's like, that's really useful. Like, who would have thought? I mean, like, I certainly didn't at the time think that what you're seeing in a Hanlon's totally reflects the deposit scale, right? It's that macro reflects the micro and vice versa, like that fractal nature of geology. I have yet to see it disproven. I've found that I can rarely get into the level of detail I want to anything under an hour. It's like, like 45 minutes maybe, but there's so many lessons, and we didn't even talk about like, the cool strip logs on the floor with the yarn, right? Like there's so many things, and I think that's kind of a, I don't know, like it's amazing to think back on just how unique an individual Raul was, and how like, I mean, like, I know he gets a lot of grief in the, for his gruffness and some of his ideas people were opposed to. But in terms of like it was the hardest job interview I've ever done. He looked at like any mapping I could share, which was hard because you can't share all your
Yep.
mapping. But and he was a critical judge of it, and it was fair. That was the hardest part, is when he pointed out my deficits, they were dead on, and he was like, we want to teach you these things and we want to improve these things. And I actually didn't think I was going to get the job because I was like, and I was like, what a unique individual, like to have acquired that many good geologists. I mean, like I always joke around, like myself not included, right? But it's like what an amazing effort that alone is. And what a cool time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and that's the deal with him, and I look at that I have pretty much the same experience. He's a tough guy to work with, but the guy gave me a chance when I'm just like nobody, right? He gave me a chance and gave me the room to the way he puts it, "I'll give you enough rope to hang yourself." So and he did, right? So I chose to swing, I didn't hang.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've done just fine with your career since then.
Yeah,
So it's just
yes.
like
So I
it's
value that, and and
yeah.
and that's the learning, and that's why he's so gruff sometimes about things. Might have been his personality too. Everything was about being very observational, and he was a former USGS geologist, right? So that was kind of the deal with the USGS. I don't think they're quite as
It's not the same as
it's
what
not
it
the same
was, right?
organization as it was, from the 40s to the 80s. So
Mhm.
in the US, that
That certainly
foundation was
guided
key.
his perception, right? And that's
Yeah.
like the way he did things, and yeah, it's and then there was the whole other side of him where it was like I was blown away when he named that after his wife, like the Helen Zone, and it was like, I had no idea that you were so sentimental, Raul.
Well, no, Raul did not name the Helen Zone after his wife. That was
Really?
no, that was the CEO of the company who did that.
Good to know.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was wrong on the sentimentalism. But, no, it's I don't know. No, just I don't know, incredible time, and I really appreciate you coming on this show. I know everybody I've ever talked to and that I've asked to be a guest has been extremely hesitant because nobody wants to talk about themselves, right? So that's why I'm trying to focus on the experiences and things because I think those are actually fairly universally applicable to other deposits and other discoveries. I mean, like we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't passionate, right? With how many layoffs we've gone through, it's not the first one, it's not the last. I don't even know how many it's been now.
Yeah. At least 3 I've been through.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking it's 4, maybe 5 for me, and every one of them is just as hard, right? It's like every one of them, the uncertainty. I prefer the things like what Raul did, where it was like, he dropped the hammer and it was like done and dusted that day, right? It's like if you're wondering and worrying, that's the layoffs that suck, right?
Yeah, that's the 2nd one that I went through, when I worked at Comstock was that way, so it was at the end, and it was every week, like, you see a couple more guys go out the door, and then the next week, a couple more guys go out the door, and you're like, "When's my turn? Because it's coming."
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was like I got laid off twice from Comstock. Well, technically, I actually neither time did I get laid off. I turned in my notice as Jim, like my boss, was handing me a layoff notice both
Holy cow.
times. I mean, it was like it could not have been better timing. And
You seem to be
and it
pretty good at
was
that, Scott.
I I've often wondered in hindsight, I could have stayed on at a number of companies that I saw the writing on the wall and went, "Ooh, maybe it's time to jump." And I was like, and so I've been a little more retrospective since then, where I've gone, okay, maybe I should actually hang around and see how this plays out because maybe I'm more kind of going back to that imposter syndrome. I still kind of go, do I really add value? And I know I do, like intellectually, but you still, even 20 years later, still feel that sometimes where I go, oh, if they're gonna do layoffs, maybe it'll be me. And it's kind of yeah, it's just a bad feeling, right?
It is. I'm dealing with that right now with the current project I'm on. Yeah, and I've
It's
been doing
hard.
this for a while because
Yeah,
it's high
yeah.
profile, like, and that's exactly the reason, so it's high profile and they put me on it.
Yeah, well, you learned early on, like, like the ways to deal with pressure and the way not to deal with pressure, right? And I think that's maybe a really valuable lesson as well, is just yeah, it's wild, right? It's just totally wild. Like I've
I'm ex the way to put it is I'm excited and scared at the same time, so that's the best way to put it. To be honest, I'm excited and scared at the same time.
Yep.
Because it's absolutely amazing that what I'm working on now, it goes right back to just the same as when at Cove-McCoy. It's the same type of it's the same feeling. I have that same feeling right now, and it's great. It's really a good thing. But I recognize the other side of it is I'm scared, right? I'm scared,
Mm,
and that's good because it means it matters, right? This matters. It's my brain saying, "Hey, buddy, pay attention. You got it. And just do it." Right? And so I'll
I
just
think
do it.
that's a really good lesson, right? Because it does matter, and it is your brain warning you about the importance of it, and I think a lot of people kinda dismiss that concern, and I think it's important to pay attention to it.
Digging deep where the stories hide, through the hills and the mountains wide. Pickaxe swing and the earth unfolds, chasing dreams in the dirt and gold. Geology calling under our feet, secrets are buried in the rock and heat. With a heart full of wonder and a map in hand, exploring the treasures of this great land.